Thank you for enduring that long read. And thank you so much to the ICMA for having me here and for this award. It's a very meaningful award to me after the last couple of years. I want to join with others in acknowledging the land that we're on, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and we have so much work to do in every part of our life to narrow the gaps and deal with our colonial heritage. My management accounting lecturer of 1973, I really hope is not in the room, because they would probably be quite hysterical at me being honoured in this way by a management accounting organisation. I went on from economics to do many things that did not relate to accounting, but I do remember those lectures, and which I really enjoyed, and I have found the tools of clear thinking that come from a good education through accounting of great benefit to me in every part of my life. I acknowledge the specific work of recent times that is reflected in this award. I've been working hard and unexpectedly in trying to expose and push for more transparency, especially in the very big accounting firms, the Big Four. Most prominently, I have pushed very hard with others around PwC and its activities in Australia. And of course, it is an international question now, the behaviours and accountability and transparency that should be placed on PwC and its activities. But in saying that I've made my contribution, I want to be really clear that there are others who've made really important contributions at my side, and in particular, I want to acknowledge the incredible role that investigative journalists play on every significant question that our society faces. I've long been an enthusiast for journalists and the role they play, but the work of Adele Ferguson in a long career, but in recent times, in exposing conflicts of interest in PwC and KPMG and in other parts of the big consulting four, it's really important. And I really want to acknowledge Neil Chenoweth and Ed Tadros, who in the pages of the Financial Review have forensically exposed the conflicts of interest, the poor behaviour, the dishonesty, which some people in the field and within the Big Four have undertaken. So thank you for your work. It really is important. And as a previous person who stood on this ground, I just want to acknowledge Adele. And I also, Tom Ravlick, I should have mentioned also, who's here as well, who has been like a dog with a very big bone in the Parliament, attending hearings, making sure the evidence that is drawn out of, often very reluctantly, from senior people in these very big organisations, and Tom has played a very important role in assisting the work of the Senate and the Parliament. So thank you, Tom, also for your contribution. Every one of those journalists has been very significantly dependent on whistleblowers. We were talking about whistleblowers earlier outside. There are whistleblowers who misuse whistleblowing capabilities and possibilities for themselves, but I can tell you I have been shocked and amazed about the incredibly significant role of whistleblowers within the Big Four and outside it, who have insisted on bringing to the Senate, at great personal risk, their stories from living and working inside PwC and the other Big Four firms. I've had a regular relationship with a set of whistleblowers whose names I don't know. I don't know where they work. I don't know which state they live in. They're incredibly careful about their identities because they know not only would they lose their job, they'd lose their career if their employer knew what they were doing. So the whistleblowers have been very important. And also I want to comfort you about we've seen a lot of very poor behaviour in the Senate in recent times, but I want to tell you there are some very good senators in the Senate who work together, really hard together, and we feel deeply competitive with each other because we're in competitive parties, but we have been united in pursuit of honesty, and better behaviour, in particular in relation to these inquiries we have held. And I want to acknowledge Senator Deb O'Neill, New South Wales Labor Senator, and Senator Paul Scarr from Queensland, a Liberal senator. So many good people. I want you to be confident, even though you see that appalling behaviour, if ever you torture yourself by watching Question Time, who work together and use the resources you give them to as good or effect as we can manage. So this whole chapter, and I won't go on and on, but it started with PwC. And just to remind you what happened in those early days, Peter John Collins signed confidentiality agreements and was invited in to consult with Treasury about changes in international tax law. And he took that information back to PwC and monetised it, earning PwC some millions of dollars, and worked to assist some of the very biggest multinational companies on the planet to work their way around the tax, in tax avoidance. That was, as it turns out, there are many chapters and twists and turns in this story, but it is, for those of you who are teachers in this room, it is a beautiful case study of how not to deal with a disaster. It is a wonderful story and example of how the cover-up is worse than the crime. Many in PwC have been unfairly contaminated by the failure of PwC to this day to come clear and be clear about who exactly knew what, both within the company, within the firm, it's not a company, within the partnership, and more broadly internationally. So really, transparency begins from the beginning of an error, and it's very important, as I'm sure many of you in this room know, to deal with it straight up and honestly. We have only recently, this is a matter that began at the beginning of last year. We've seen in the last few weeks the Federal Police doing raids on the head office of PwC over several days, and raids on people's homes in this city. We still don't know who did what within this firm. We do know that there are significant players internationally who probably are implicated. And also this whole chapter has exposed some weaknesses in our own institutions. Within the ATO, certainly, real challenges in the way the ATO dealt with this matter. And it took a little known body. You probably all did know that we had something called the Tax Practitioners Board, but most citizens don't know such a thing exists. But it was actually this little body, the little engine that blew the whistle on what happened and actually caused the issue to be published on their website very quietly early in January, and then that's what Neil Tadros got onto and very quickly exposed and has continued to expose ever since. It's a monumental story of ethical failure, and it's a really interesting study of a business model where people who are very senior in a very large firm, thousands of employees, hundreds of partners, where the dollar is everything. Chasing the contract, winning the business drives everything within the organisation. And if you don't believe me, then have a look at Ziggy Sikorsky's review of PwC's culture and its internal signalling and its ethical failures as a model of governance. It's a really fascinating study of governance failure in a big partnership. However, sadly, the difficulties and challenges in the Big Four are not confined only to PwC. We've seen some really important work in relation, for example, to KPMG and its work, a very significant player in the health industry, a very profitable set of consultancies across the country by EY, Deloitte and KPMG. These companies have been doing billions of dollars of business in the public sector in the last 10 years, and they have been doing core public sector work at enormous profit and coming into a health department contracted to do one small task and then working their way up to farm other opportunities at great profit. So conflicts of interest, a lot of examples of a land and expand strategy, and conditions of employment in many of these very large firms, which have been extremely costly for some individuals. Some people have lost their lives, some people have lost their health. The conditions of employment, if you want to expose your students to those, have a look at Elizabeth Broddick's review of the cultures within EY. So we have done a lot of work in the Parliament. We've made a bunch of recommendations to try, and we have been very well informed by terrific people inside these big firms who want things to be good. They want to improve things. They want to make these good places to work driven by ethical practice. They're incredibly important to the climate challenges we face. Some of these consulting organisations are critical to finding solutions to how we deal with the existential crisis that Brett spoke of. A recent series, if you want to entertain yourself with it, in The Guardian, which looked at McKinsey and the role that McKinsey is playing in the expansion of oil and gas and fossil fuels in Africa, in India. A massive increase in the consulting work they are doing, yet inside that firm, 1,000 of their people a couple of years back wrote to their senior leaders and said, we need to be part of the solution, not part of expanding the problem for our kids and their future. So we've pushed for a whole bunch of changes, Deb O'Neill, Paul Scarr and myself, and with many others helping us. First of all, PwC should not be allowed to contract to public sector anywhere in the country until it's come clean and done all of the things that the Parliament's asked it to do. Secondly, I'm starting to wave my arms. I feel like I'm in the chamber. Sorry, that's a bad sign. I'm not going to go on for much longer, but we've also said that partnerships should be smaller. They have partnerships with up to 1,000 partners is legal. I grew up on a farm. The partnership was 4 people. You actually knew what your borrowings were, and you knew if someone next to you was buying a tractor they shouldn't. When you're in an accounting firm with 800, 900 partners, you actually do not know what is going on. You do not know what the ethics of all your partners, and you probably don't know the names of lots of people you're actually in a business with. So we say the partnership should be no larger than 400. I wanted it to be 100, didn't win that argument, but it needs to be a lot smaller. And of course, that's what lawyers are required to be at in terms of size. We also need to separate audit from consulting activities. We found plenty of evidence of people who are harvesting consulting information to inform audit or audit to inform consulting. It's just very poor practice. We need much more oversight about the finances and publication of financial records in these companies, information about remuneration, the kind of standards that your average big company has to provide. These partnerships must be doing. We need more powers for ASIC, and we need to improve the corporate governance and the professional governance through the accounting organisations on what goes on in these firms. And we need to have a consultancy code and a register. It's completely unregulated business, consulting, and it really needs to have some standards for behaviour and some accountability when they're not followed. We also need to protect our whistleblowers much more assertively and make sure we've got those protections in the public and private sector. I didn't go to the Parliament to work on the Big Four and accounting. I went because I'm a grandmother and a mother, and I want our kids to have a bit of what I had. I had free education. You've heard all about it, 7 years of it. Right through to PhD, I never paid $1 for it. In fact, I had a tertiary education living allowance, which allowed me and my sister to shout the slab of beer at the end of the month with just enough money for it. Kids these days, anyone who's teaching them, you know, they're earning a living to get themselves in front of you in a classroom, and they're mostly online because they're trying to earn a living. Free education, affordable housing, very important, and a secure employment trajectory. Kids these days don't have that. We should be passing that on to our kids, and that's why I went to the Parliament. But even beyond all of that was, for me, it's about climate and how we can do the things we need to do. Brett mentioned a range of factors that are really important for politicians to think about. The one thing I would say that I've learned that trumps all of them is vested interests. And it's vested interests which have a real purpose and effect on the Parliament. We've seen it in the last week. And I would encourage all of you to use whatever powers you have in your professional and personal lives to insist on more honesty about what's going on, who's paying what and who owes what to who, because it really affects the future we will give our children. Thanks very much, and I'm very proud to have this award.